So how many people live more in the center of the city where, you know, the hills are there, but they're kind of far away? Yeah. Okay. The reason I asked that is there are differences when you're gardening for wildlife. Those that are on the fringe of the valley do have a bit of an advantage, especially when we're talking about mammals. But there are things you can do right in the middle of the valley, in the places you wouldn't even expect that would have wildlife, to increase insects and birds. But you're probably not going to see too many mammals coming into the middle of San Jose, and maybe you don't really want them anyway because it's, well, it's somewhat of a population sink. You're going to bring them in, yay, I have coyotes, now they're dead. So, you know, you don't want to have a population sink where you're bringing something in for it to come and die. But if you're out on the fringe of the valley, you do have a little bit of an advantage, or if you're in the hills especially. These are just areas that are less peopled right now, and let's hope it stays that way. Because people are the ones that have really changed things. So let's get started here. This is a garden in Campbell, by the way, that just has a lot of the different elements we'll be talking about today. Not necessarily the species, but there's your blue flax in the foreground there. And usually that flower just goes crazy and then drops a whole bunch of seeds. And like I said, it sometimes is a problem to have so much of it. But a lot of us would enjoy having those kind of problems. That's beyond. Okay. Yay. Well, bringing habitat home. I'm not talking about bringing a shovel and bringing this home. This is serpentine soils that occur on Coyote Ridge. It's sort of a last stand for habitat in a way, because these areas have excluded a lot of the weeds that grow in most other areas. So what's really changed habitat for this valley? And this valley was incredibly rich with it. But what's really changed it has been human presence and the fact that we've paved over much of it. That which we haven't paved over, we've introduced things from Europe that really like it here. So they grow really well. But there are still some refugia, like these serpentine soils, that contain beauties like this California dandelion. This is a native dandelion. You'd love to see this in your yard. It belongs here, and so it belongs here, but it also brings the insects that belong here. And people hear insects and they think, ew, but butterflies are insects. Native bees are insects. And then birds prefer our local insects. You know, the local birds would like to eat the local insects a lot of times. So you're bringing in, that's a checker spot on Yerba Santa. You know, these are just things you can introduce to increase your habitat potential on your property. This is a particularly good year down by the Pinnacles. You're probably not going to get this in your backyard. But it's just something to look at as far as differing levels. You've got annuals sort of on the ground there. You've got the bush lupin sprouting up here and there. This is just great habitat for many, many creatures. And just very rich and beautiful in a particularly good year, 2005. Tidy tips, bringing something like this. If you live, you know, in the fringe of the hills, maybe near Serpentine, you have a chance of seeing a day checker spot butterfly flying on your property. This is an extremely rare insect nowadays. It used to be widespread throughout the Bay Area, but now it's restricted to these little islands of what's left. These guys here, you know, how do you garden for a burrowing owl? Well, ask the college, because this picture was taken, you can see the spot where this is taken out this window. These burrowing owls are occurring here, and without very much assistance, in fact, much hindrance. You know, the college has signs up that tell people about it, but other than that, their plans for expansion are not going to help this creature much, because the end of this creature is pavement. And that's what we've done to most, its favorite places are where we live. So how would you garden for this guy? You'd leave him alone. Isn't that something? He's sitting up there on a high fire hydrant. You can see that very high fire hydrant. I went and looked for him this year, and didn't see any. So I imagine they're around and about. Your question?
Yes, how would you, is the burrow visible?
The burrow is visible. What's crucial to these guys is the presence of ground squirrels.
Would you confuse the burrow with a mouse or a
No, the distinguishing thing for this guy, and mind you, I'm not encouraging people to garden for burrowing owl because it's really difficult. They're going to be where they're going to be. And where they like to be is right in this area along the bay and sort of near the airport. So if you have a house near there, you have a chance of seeing one. They depend on ground squirrels. Ground squirrels make their burrows. They occupy the burrow once they've probably eaten the ground squirrel. But once the ground squirrel is evacuated, they occupy the burrow of the ground squirrel. You can tell that burrowing owl's been there when you see owl pellets. Basically things they cough up, the bones of their prey. And so that's how you can, and usually there'll be some feathers and some bird poop right next to the hole. And that ground squirrels don't do that. So
If
that's,
it's like wide open area, would they go in that area?
you know, they can. They're really finicky. There's been a lot of studies. This has been an extremely studied species and is one of the keystone species for our area as far as these low valley grasslands. And they will go where they'll go, and we're having a hard time sort of mitigating for the loss of their habitat. In other words, you can't take them and go, here's a nice, perfectly beautiful place that according to the book should be just fine for you. Here. They don't like it. They try to find their way back here and are often killed. So there's a few remaining here on the campus. There's a few. The biggest population in Santa Clara Valley is the airport. Nice open spaces where there's plenty of ground squirrels.
And the sewage treatment plant.
Sewage treatment plant is the other
They
one.
just moved into the shoreline park in Mountain View.
Right, so they like these low-lying areas where they can eke out a living.
They're not very afraid of people.
They are not, and that's my next slide. Thank you, Jeff. Well, that's not my next slide, but look at this one. Cleaning himself on the gym fire hydrant, and I love this one. This next one, if it will go there.
Even though there are a lot of ground squirrels, say up around the Ed Levin area, they don't go that high up?
They don't. They tend to nest right here in the lowlands. They might forage in the summer and fall up in higher lands, but they don't go much higher than a few hundred feet. So Ed Levin's sort of up and over there. They have been probably spotted there occasionally, but it's not their breeding habitat. And my thing just died. My advancer thingy. So I'll hand advance, and there's the hydrant where that guy was sitting. Here he is right here. Here's the students. By the way, here's the fenced off area. That's the owl habitat. They're here in the unfenced off area. So just goes to show you, they'll be where they'll be, and you can't do much about it. But if you were gardening for burrowing owl, open space and a fire hydrant, that's all you need in your yard. Probably you're not going to garden for burrowing owl, but it is curious to see how they'll be where they'll be, and you can't do much about it, except for stay out of their way. And I wish we would, stay out of their way a little better. Like I said, if the college gets its way and expands the way it wants to, these guys won't be here anymore. They're eking out a living. It's not easy. But they're not at all afraid of people. So how about this lovely sterile landscape? This is something that's very common in this valley. When I'm a Midwesterner. I moved here about 20 years ago. When I moved out here, I thought, they have lawns here. Really? Really? Because it just doesn't make sense to have a nice lush lawn like this, because you know how much water and how much fertilizer and how much pesticide has to go on this to make it look like this? An incredible amount. And I know some people, it's a sport to some people, the lawn. Lawn sport. But it's incredibly resource intensive. It's also very sterile when it comes to habitat. Very little is going to live there. I'm sure they've killed most of the gophers. There's just not much for anybody there. Perfectly patriotic individual here in San Jose has the roses and the little lawn. Boy, not much there either. The roses may attract a bee or two, but that's about it. Now here's somebody who's, they're done with the lawn. But they just let the weeds grow. I mean, at least they're not dumping, I know they're not using herbicide. If they were, there wouldn't be all these weeds, but this really doesn't have much value at all.
This looks like San Jose.
This is actually Campbell. This is next to that Campbell garden that was the opening shot.
Nice
this is San Jose. This is Campbell. Those are, that's a non-native dandelion relative. Probably does provide some forage for a few bees. But how about this garden? How about that front lawn? Compare it to Boringville here, where there's nothing to eat. If you're an insect, you don't even look here. You come right here. If you're a bird, you're hiding in here. You may even find lizards in here. You're not going to find anything here. You might find a Cooper's hawk here, hunting on people, on individuals in here. So there's a whole hierarchy of things that can happen when you start with, from the ground up. Another example here of a nice busy yard in San Jose. This is right in downtown San Jose.
It's the same place, isn't it?
No, different down the street. Another one, just lovely. The problem with these, and there's lots of examples. So before we started here, we were talking about the Going Native Garden Tour, which just happened. 70 gardens this year on the tour. 69 actually. Was it? Great. What we need is probably about 50% of all yards to look like this, and we'd be doing well. So that's part of what we're here about today, is that yes, you can do your part if you live in urban San Jose or urban Santa Clara or anywhere around here, but you need to also sort of raise awareness and bring consciousness to your neighbors, because the more of these we can patch together, the more chance we have of having habitat to bring in all the things we want. You can bring in a fair number of insects and birds to here, but the more, so that's one direction on this street, there's the other direction on this street. And, you know, there's this nice little island of habitat surrounded by a desert that's just not worth much to anybody. Even, this is Coyote Lake County Park down in the South Valley. Even here, where you think, oh, it's wide open land, there's no pavement, and it is lovely to have open spaces. However, this isn't doing great either. You know, oh, there's some nice loop in there. Imagine this. Every blade of grass here you're seeing is not native. Is introduced. If this weren't here, it'd be a dazzling display of flowers. And it'd be a scene that's buzzing. You go by here and see just insect activity going crazy. Now you see sporadic. Same thing here. This is a nice slope that's preserved and not going to be paved, but boy, not a whole lot of habitat there. Well, it needs, I don't know that we're going to ever get these areas back. I mean, it needs some serious thought and some serious work, but my main point is, when you're providing these little islands, you're really doing quite a service to wildlife. Because not only have we paved over much of the valley, we've also brought things like this that have spread out. We've degraded what's left. So there's not, it's not a happy story, but the happy story is there are things